Week my brother emptied my studio's client database and forwarded every contact to his new competing business. He sent me a text that said one word: upgrade. I had built fieldwork creative on a single contract in a rented desk in a shared office space in East Hamilton. That was 6 years before any of this happened. I was 29 years old, working as a freelance brand strategist after leaving a mid-sized agency downtown where I had spent 4 years watching other people's ideas get approved and mine get tabled for further consideration. I left on a Friday afternoon and did not go back. I gave myself 8 months of savings and a used standing desk, and I started calling people I had met at every industry event I had attended but never properly followed up with. The name fieldwork came from something my old professor used to say, that real brand work happened in the field, not in boardrooms. I liked the word. It felt honest. It felt like the kind of name you had to mean. By the second year, I had 4 retainer clients and a waiting list for project work. By the third year, a regional business publication in the Hamilton-Burlington corridor listed Fieldwork Creative in a roundup of independent consultancies doing work worth watching. My brother called me when that came out. He said, "Nice little mention." That was his review. My family had a pattern I only understood in pieces over many years. My parents, my father, a retired civil engineer, my mother, a former school administrator, had 2 children. I was the older one who had moved out at 22 on principle and figured things out quietly. My brother was the younger one who came back at 27 after a startup dissolved and stayed for 3 years and was never really asked to leave. The financial accounting over that period was something I only learned about gradually. My parents co-signed his apartment lease when he finally did move out, twice. They covered a line of credit balance of just over $19,000 in a single payment after he said he needed to reset. When he told them he wanted to launch a consulting business, they contributed $42,000 in startup capital through what they described to me as a personal loan they did not expect to be repaid in any formal way. The business lasted 14 months. I never asked for any of this. I also did not receive any of it. When I needed a co-signer for a small equipment financing arrangement through my business account at Meridian, my father told me he thought it was better to keep financial and family matters separate. I respected that. I found another guarantor through a former client and I moved on. What I did not know, what I had no way of knowing, was that the money my parents had been extending to my brother over the years had a source, and that source had its own terms. I did not know about the home equity line of credit they had taken out against the house on Ellsworth Crescent, where they had lived for 21 years. I did not know the outstanding balance or what covenanters the lender had attached to it. I did not know any of that when my brother sat down at a coffee shop across from me in January and told me he was thinking of pivoting. He used that word, pivoting. He said he had been developing a service concept, brand positioning and marketing strategy for trades businesses and home service contractors, which was, he explained, an underserved segment with high growth potential. He said he had done his research. He said he needed a co-founder with the right client network and operational credibility, and that he had been thinking about approaching me with a partnership structure that would allow him to come in at an equal equity split in exchange for his capital contribution. I asked what capital contribution. He said he had access to financing. I asked him what the service offering actually looked like, and he described, with reasonable fluency, a version of work I had already been doing with trades and contractor clients for 2 years. I had 3 active retainer clients in that space. I had a methodology. I had templates and frameworks I had built from scratch. He had a pitch deck he had made over a long weekend using a template. I told him it did not work for me. I told him I was not looking for a partner and that my business model was built around staying small and high margin. He looked at the wall behind me for a moment and then he said, very quietly, that he had talked to Dad about the idea and that Dad thought it was a good fit. He said it the way people say things when the statement is meant to function as something other than information. I told him I had to get back to my afternoon calls. He left without visible frustration. He left the way someone leaves when they have simply made a note of something. 4 months later, I was at a client meeting in Oakville when my phone started vibrating in my jacket pocket in a way that felt irregular. A message from my bookkeeper. Then one from a client. Then a call from a number I did not recognize. I stepped out of the meeting. The call was from a woman named, and I want to be accurate, Theodora, a brand manager at a contractor supply company who had been in conversation with me about a retainer engagement for 6 weeks. She said she had received an unsolicited email that morning from a consultant named, she spelled it out for me, Callum. The email offered her firm a discounted introductory package for brand strategy services focused on the trade sector. The email referenced her company by name. It referenced the specific challenges she and I had been discussing privately. It referenced a pricing model that was close enough to mine that Theodora had assumed at first it was some kind of follow-up from me using a different address. I thanked her for calling me. I asked her to forward me the email. She did within 3 minutes. It was my brother. His new business was called Groundwork Strategy. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a commercial plaza in Oakville and I read the email twice. He had used my client's name correctly. He had used language that mirrored conversations I had documented in my CRM. Conversations he could only have accessed if he had been inside my client database. My CRM was cloud-based. I had given him temporary login credentials 8 months earlier when he had asked if he could look at how I managed project intake, said he was trying to set up his own system and wanted to see mine as a reference. I had said, fine. I had not revoked the access after because I had not thought of it again. The access had still been there. He had used it. I did not cry in the parking lot. I drove back to Hamilton and I called a commercial litigation lawyer named. I found her through a referral from another client who had dealt with a non-compete issue 2 years earlier, Saskia Oduya. She answered on the third ring. I told her what had happened. She said, send me everything. Don't contact your brother. Don't contact your parents. Send me the CRM access logs, the email chain, the client communications, the original credential grant. I sent it all within 2 hours. What Saskia found in the following week was methodical and, in a way that made me feel genuinely cold when she explained it, thorough. My CRM provider maintained access logs. My brother had logged in 11 times over a period of 3 weeks using the credentials I had provided 8 months earlier. He had accessed the contacts module, the project notes, the proposal templates, and the pricing documentation. He had exported a contact list. He had done this at 11 in the evening on a Tuesday, which was, I noted, the week after I had declined his partnership offer. He had contacted. Saskia's review identified this. At least 14 of my active or prospective clients using information he could only have obtained from those records. In Ontario, that is not just a civil matter. Unauthorized access to a computer system for the purpose of commercial gain is an offense under the Criminal Code of Canada. The civil exposure, breach of confidence, misappropriation of trade secrets, intentional interference with economic relations was separate and significant. Saskia filed a civil claim. She also sent a formal report to the relevant authorities. The CRM access logs time-stamped with his IP address with the exported contact list constituted what Saskia described as unusually clean evidence. My brother's lawyer called on a Thursday. He was friendly in the way people are friendly when they have not yet reviewed the access logs. He talked about family situations and the possibility of an informal resolution. Saskia let him finish, and then she asked him whether he had reviewed the timestamped server records she had attached to the claim filing. There was a pause of the kind that means something is being reassessed in real time. He said he would need to review the full disclosure package and call back. There is something in that pause I keep returning to, not satisfaction exactly, something more like clarity. The feeling of having been precise. What I did not know, what I had not known to look for, was the clause in the terms of my CRM service agreement that I had not read carefully when I first set up the account. What Saskia found, working through it with a junior associate over 2 evenings, was a provision that established civil liability not only against the individual who had conducted the unauthorized access, but against any business entity that had demonstrably benefited from information obtained through that access. Groundwork Strategy had sent 14 solicitation emails using my client data. 14 was not ambiguous. The claim was filed against my brother individually and against Groundwork Strategy as a business entity. Total damages claimed included lost contract value from clients who had declined to proceed with me after receiving his solicitation, costs of remediation and client communications, and a figure for misappropriation of proprietary business methodology. The total figure was $81,000. My brother called me on a Saturday morning. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that lasted 4 minutes and 40 seconds. I listened to it once. He said I was being dramatic. He said he had not taken anything I was using. He said what he had done was look at some files, which was something I had given him permission to do, and that the way I was characterizing it was unfair to him and hurtful to our parents. He said our father was not doing well with the stress of the situation and that I needed to think about what I was doing to the family. I did not call back. My father called on Monday. He was composed in the way that meant he had prepared what he wanted to say. He told me the situation had become serious in ways I might not be fully aware of. He said the home equity line of credit, and this was the first time I had heard those words in connection with anything involving my family, had a condition attached to it. A covenant, he called it. He said that any active legal claim exceeding $50,000 filed against a member of the household or a financial dependent of the primary borrowers could trigger a mandatory review by the lender. My claim was $81,000. My brother had been the financial dependent of my parents within the meaning of the HELOC agreement because they had been making payments toward his line of credit, which they had co-signed. He told me I needed to withdraw the claim. I told him I was not going to do that. He said I was going to put them in a position where they might lose access to equity they had spent 21 years building. I told him that my brother had spent 3 weeks accessing my business records, had exported my client list, and had used private information from my consulting files to solicit my clients directly. I told them that 14 clients had received those emails and that 3 had told me they were confused about whether they should continue working with me, given the apparent dispute within whatever firm they thought was involved. I told them that one of those 3 clients had paused a retainer renewal that represented over $20,000 in annual revenue. My father said that was not what my brother had intended. I said the access logs showed 11 separate login sessions. I said intention was not a legal standard for the offense in question. He said several more things. I heard them all. I told him that I loved him and that I was not dropping the claim. He did not call again after that. My mother called the following week through my brother. He texted me asking if he could conference her in. I said no. She sent a written message through him that said, in full, "This is not who we raised you to be." I read it standing in my kitchen at 8:30 in the morning before my first client call of the day. I set my phone face down on the counter and made coffee and stood at the window that looked over the backyard where, 6 years earlier, I had sat on the steps and drafted the first scope of work I had ever sent to a paying client. I thought about the word upgrade in that text he had sent. I thought about how he had delivered it, as if what I had built was already something he had the right to improve upon. My bookkeeper, she'd been with me since year 2, and her steadiness during this period was something I cannot overstate, helped me document every client impact. Every paused conversation, every email I had to send explaining that I was aware of the solicitation and that Fieldwork Creative was fully operational and independent. Saskia called me on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The lender, it was a regional credit union, as it turned out, had conducted their mandatory review. My parents had been informed that the existing HELOC covenant required them to either reduce the outstanding balance by 35% within 60 days or enter a renegotiated repayment structure at a significantly higher rate. They did not have the liquidity to reduce the balance. The renegotiation would cost them, over the remaining term of the loan, a figure that Saskia described as meaningful. My brother's new lawyer, the friendly one had been replaced, came back with a settlement offer in November. It was $40,000, structured as an immediate payment of $15,000 from my brother personally and $25,000 through a payment plan with my parents listed as guarantors. Saskia advised me to counter. The final settlement reached without proceeding to trial was $67,000. My parents were co-obligors on the personal guarantee. The payment schedule ran over 18 months. As a condition of the settlement, Groundwork Strategy was required to cease all outreach to clients or prospective clients whose information had originated from my CRM. The criminal matter took longer. The access logs, the exported contact file, the evidence of commercial use, the report had been reviewed and a formal process was underway. My brother received a conditional discharge with 200 hours of community service and a prohibition on accessing any computer system belonging to a business competitor for a period of 3 years. The conditional discharge was the part that frustrated people when I explained it afterward. I understood their frustration. I shared some of it, but the civil outcome was what mattered in practical terms, and the practical terms were clear. I want to be precise about what reopening felt like. It was not dramatic. I sent a note to all active and paused clients on a Wednesday morning. The note was 3 paragraphs. It explained that the matter had been resolved, that Fieldwork Creative was operating fully, and that I was booking new retainer conversations for the coming quarter. 11 clients responded within 48 hours. 2 of the 3 who had paused re-engaged. The third had moved forward with another firm, which I understood. My bookkeeper got a raise, effective the first of the month. The Theodora situation, the call from Oakville, the woman who had thought at first she was receiving a confused follow-up from me, resolved in a way I had not expected. She signed a retainer agreement the week after I sent the note. She said she had been watching how I handled the situation and that it had told her more about how I worked than any proposal document would have. I thought about that for a while afterward. My brother deleted the Groundwork Strategy website. The internet has a memory for these things. I did not go looking. My parents have my number. I have not blocked it. Neither of us has called the other since the settlement documents were finalized. We exist in the same city. We drive on some of the same roads. We share the same weather. We do not currently share anything else. Fieldwork Creative is operating. Last quarter was the strongest revenue period since I started. The standing desk I bought secondhand in my first year is still in the corner of my office. I have never replaced it because it works exactly as well as it did the day I got it, and I have never seen the point in changing something that does what it was meant to do. I keep coming back to the credential grant. The Tuesday evening I said yes. Go ahead. Look at how I set up my intake system if it helps you build yours. I keep returning to that moment not to punish myself for it, but because I think it contains something real about how these things actually happen. It is not usually a stranger with a sledgehammer. It is someone who already has a key, or in this case, a login. Someone you handed access to because it seemed like the ordinary kind of thing that people who trust each other do. The question I cannot fully let go of is this: at what point does generosity become something that can be walked through, and how carefully are you accounting for who has the door open? I think about the word upgrade more than I probably should. One word in a text message. No punctuation. Sent after he had already been inside my system for 3 weeks, already had my client list exported, already had the name Groundwork Strategy sitting in a draft somewhere. He sent that word and I read it as dismissiveness. It was actually a confession. What happened between that text and the settlement documents being signed was not luck. It was not fate in any mysterious sense. It was cause and effect, which is the only framework I have ever found reliable. My brother made specific choices. Those choices created specific records. Those records existed in time-stamped server logs that a competent lawyer could read in an afternoon. The consequences followed from the actions in a straight line. There was nothing remarkable about that sequence except that he had apparently not considered it before he acted. I have thought a lot about what actually protected me in this situation. It was not strength in the emotional sense. It was not anger, which I had, but did not use as a tool. What protected me was that I had been precise. I had read my service agreements. I had a bookkeeper who maintained clean records. I had a lawyer I could call on a Tuesday afternoon who answered and said, "Send me everything." The intellectual rigor I had applied to building fieldwork, the same rigor my brother had looked at across a coffee shop table and called a good fit for his pivot, was exactly what made his actions traceable and my claim viable. You cannot separate the quality of thinking from the quality of outcomes. I have found this to be consistently true. Saskia called me once during the process to check in, not about the case, but about how I was doing. I told her I was fine, which was mostly accurate. She said something I wrote down afterward. She said the cleanest cases she handled were always the ones where the injured party had kept good records. Not because they expected to need them, but because they were the kind of person who kept good records. I think about that distinction a lot. The preparation was not defensive. It was just how I worked. It became protective as a consequence. What I want to say about the resilience part, the getting up and continuing part, is that it did not feel heroic from the inside. It felt like sending a 3-paragraph email on a Wednesday morning and then taking my first client call of the day. It felt like my bookkeeper making coffee while we went through the impact documentation line by line. It felt like Theodora signing a retainer the week after I sent the note and saying she had been watching how I handled the situation. The recovery was not dramatic, it was sequential. One thing, then the next thing, then the thing after that. My parents have my number. I do not know what we are to each other right now. I know we are in the same city, and that we share the same weather, and that neither of us has called the other since the documents were signed. I do not know if that changes. What I keep returning to is not the outcome, it is the credential grant. The Tuesday evening I said yes, go ahead, look at my intake system if it helps you build yours. I gave access because it seemed like the ordinary thing that people who trust each other do. I think the question I am still sitting with is not whether I was right to trust, but whether I was right to trust without thinking about what I was actually handing over. There is a version of generosity that is genuinely generous. There is a version that is simply inattention, wearing the costume of openness. Learning to tell the difference, that is the work I did not know I still had to do.